66 million years ago, Earth was having its worst day ever. An asteroid slammed into the planet at roughly 45,000 miles per hour. The impact unleashed unimaginable heat, triggered massive wildfires, and filled the atmosphere with ash and sulfur. Sunlight disappeared, temperatures crashed, plants began dying, and the food chain collapsed from the bottom up. Within a geological instant, around 3/4 of all species on Earth were gone. The dinosaurs were finished, but one ancient group of reptiles was still there: crocodiles. And here's the strange part. They didn't survive because they were the biggest. They weren't the fastest. They weren't the smartest. They didn't have the most powerful bite or the most advanced body. They simply kept doing what they had already been doing for millions of years: waiting, hunting, eating almost anything they could catch, and surviving on almost nothing when food disappeared. Today, a crocodile lying motionless beside a river can look almost like a living photograph from another age. The low body, the armored back, the powerful tail, the ambush strategy. It's almost as if the asteroid came, the dinosaurs disappeared, entire ecosystems collapsed, and the crocodiles simply waited for it to be over. So what did crocodiles have that dinosaurs didn't? The obvious answer is water. Crocodiles live in rivers, lakes, swamps, and wetlands. Maybe being around water protected them from the worst effects of the impact. But that explanation doesn't hold up, because plenty of aquatic animals disappeared too. Mosasaurs, enormous marine reptiles that could reach more than 50 feet long, ruled the oceans. They lived far from the burning landscapes and forests of the continents. They still went extinct. So water wasn't enough. Maybe the secret was size. Small animals need less food, and when sunlight disappears, plants stop growing. When plants disappear, herbivores begin to starve. Then, predators lose their food. That makes being small a huge advantage. Tiny mammals survived the aftermath by eating seeds, insects, and whatever scraps they could find. But crocodiles weren't necessarily tiny. Some crocodile relatives living before the asteroid were enormous, reaching more than 30 feet long. An animal that large should need a serious amount of food. So if small size was the answer, why did these reptiles survive while so many smaller animals didn't? Maybe the answer was hiding underground. Some animals could burrow deep into the soil, escaping the initial heat and darkness. Crocodile relatives may have benefited from shelter too. But there was a problem. The asteroid didn't just create one bad day. It created years of terrible conditions. The sky remained filled with material that blocked sunlight. Plants struggled to recover. Food webs collapsed. The world became a place where finding food was far more difficult than simply surviving the initial impact. Hiding could get an animal through the first days, maybe even the first weeks, but eventually it had to come back out. And that's where crocodiles had something extremely important: their diet. Crocodiles are generalist predators. They aren't locked into one specific food source. They can eat fish, birds, mammals, insects, carrion, reptiles. If something comes close enough, it can become food. That sounds simple, but during a mass extinction, flexibility can be the difference between life and death. Imagine an animal that depends on one particular plant. That plant disappears. The animal disappears next. Now imagine a predator that depends almost entirely on one type of prey. That prey disappears. The predator follows. But a crocodile doesn't need one particular meal. If fish becomes scarce, it can eat something else. If live prey becomes difficult to find, carrion becomes an option. If food becomes extremely rare, it can simply wait. And waiting is something crocodiles are exceptionally good at. Because crocodiles are ectotherms, they don't spend enormous amounts of energy maintaining a constant internal body temperature the way mammals and birds do. That means their energy demands can be incredibly low. A crocodile can survive for months without a proper meal. Instead of constantly searching for food, it can reduce its activity and wait for the environment to improve. And after the asteroid, that ability would have been enormously valuable. The world wasn't asking animals to become stronger, it was asking them to spend less. Every calorie mattered, every meal mattered. An animal with a huge energy budget needed a constant supply of food. A crocodile didn't. It could sit almost motionless, conserve energy, and wait for an opportunity. That changes the entire survival equation. The animal doesn't need to win every hunt. It doesn't need to chase prey across enormous distances. It doesn't need to dominate an ecosystem. It only needs to survive long enough for the ecosystem to begin recovering. And there's an even deeper reason this story is so unusual. Crocodiles had already survived something like this before. Around 201 million years ago, another devastating extinction event struck Earth at the boundary between the Triassic and Jurassic periods. At the time, crocodile-like reptiles were incredibly diverse. They weren't all the slow, armored river predators we imagine today. Some lived on land, some were specialized specialized hunters, others occupied completely different ecological roles. Then the extinction came. Most of those crocodile-like lineages disappeared, but some survived, and once the pressure lifted, their descendants diversified again. That's important because it means the crocodile story isn't simply about one lucky escape. Their ancestors had already demonstrated an ability to survive enormous environmental disruption. And then, roughly 66 million years ago, they did it again. But surviving an extinction doesn't mean every member of a group survives forever. Some crocodile relatives made it through the asteroid impact and continued for millions of years afterward. One example is the Dinosaurs, a group of crocodile relatives that became successful predators in the aftermath. They spread through coastal environments and survived in a world that had just been transformed. But eventually they disappeared too. That's the part people often miss. Survival isn't the same thing as immortality. Getting through the asteroid only buys you another chance. The real test comes afterward. Can your body, your diet, your behavior, and your energy requirements continue working when the world keeps changing? For modern crocodiles, that formula kept working. And this leads to one of the most interesting ideas in evolution. Sometimes the greatest advantage isn't changing faster, it's changing less. Evolution is often described as an arms race. Animals become bigger, faster, stronger, more specialized, sharper teeth, longer legs, better weapons, more efficient ways to capture a specific kind of food. For millions of years, that strategy can work perfectly until the environment changes. Then, specialization can become a trap. The animal that was perfectly designed for one world suddenly finds itself living in another, and everything that made it successful becomes a weakness. Crocodiles took a different path. Their basic design was already extremely effective. A low-energy body, heavy armor, a powerful bite, an ambush hunting strategy, a generalist diet, and the ability to survive long periods without food. They didn't need to chase every opportunity. They could wait for opportunities to come to them. That may be the real secret behind their survival, not some mysterious superpower, not immunity to extinction, not an ability to survive anything, just an incredibly efficient way of living. Think about what an extinction event does. It removes resources, it destroys habitats, it eliminates prey, it changes temperature, it changes water systems, it tears apart food webs. Everything becomes more expensive. Food becomes harder to find, energy becomes harder to obtain. In that kind of world, an animal that needs a lot can be in serious trouble. An animal that needs very little has time, and time is exactly what crocodiles have. They can wait, they can eat when food appears, they can slow down when it doesn't, they don't need to constantly move, they don't need to constantly hunt, they don't need to constantly evolve into something more extreme. Their body plan already gives them what they need. That's why calling crocodiles living fossils can be misleading. They aren't frozen in time. Their ancestors evolved, they diversified, they changed when environmental pressure demanded it. But once a highly effective design emerged, there may simply have been less reason to completely reinvent it. Why replace a machine that already works? And this is where the crocodile story becomes bigger than crocodiles, because extinction doesn't always reward the strongest animal. It doesn't always reward the smartest. It doesn't always reward the biggest. Sometimes extinction rewards the animal that can tolerate uncertainty, the animal that can survive without much, the animal that can switch food sources, the animal that can slow down, the animal that can wait. 66 million years ago, the most dominant animals on Earth disappeared in an instant. The dinosaurs had ruled the planet for more than 160 million years. They produced some of the largest, strangest, and most specialized animals evolution had ever created. And then an asteroid changed the rules. The winners weren't necessarily the animals that had perfected the old world, they were the ones that could survive the new one. And somewhere, in a river or swamp, a crocodile was doing something remarkably simple. It was waiting. Barely moving. Saving energy. Waiting for food. Waiting for the environment to recover. It didn't know an asteroid had hit. It didn't know an extinction was happening. It didn't know that entire dynasties were disappearing around it. It didn't need to. Its survival strategy had already been working for millions of years. And while one of the greatest biological empires in Earth's history vanished, the crocodile kept doing exactly what it had always done. That's the unsettling part. Sometimes evolution doesn't reward the animal that changes the most. Sometimes it rewards the animal that already needs the least. And when the world ends, the one that can afford to wait may be the one that's still there when it begins again.